Hello, everyone. This is Robert Newkirk, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Budgeting in Three Dimensions. The topic that we're going to address today is the psychology behind why you overspend. Ooh, oh, we must be in confession now. And this is the confession that no one wants to talk about, okay? Well, let's face it. You knew you shouldn't. You had a budget, you had a plan, and you spent the money anyway. Then came the regret, the mental math, the quiet promise to do better next month. Sound familiar? Well, overspending is not a moral failure, but it's a psychological pattern. And like every pattern, it has identifiable triggers. It has predictable responses, and it has a clear path to interruption. Most financial advice tells you what to do with your money. Today, we are going to talk about what your mind does with your money and why understanding the psychology is the missing piece that makes budgeting finally work. Now, when I was at MIT, I took a psychology of gender course. And it was a class that talked about a lot of different areas. But one area that it talked about was about how men and women mentally spend their money. Okay? Now, they're different. It's different thought patterns, different processes, and it's amazing how diversely different they are. But they all kind of come with a common theme after you spend it. First, you got to blame it on something that happened that caused you to spend. Then you got to complain a little bit about why you had to spend. Then you come and justify the whole fact that you spent it in the first place. Okay? But by the end of this episode, you will understand the specific psychological forces that are driving your spending and exactly how the budgeting in three dimensions philosophy will help you neutralize them. Now, there's a psychology to overspending, believe it or not, and we want to talk about that. We want to talk about that in full. There are mental forces that override your altogether put together plan to stick to a budget. Okay? And let's talk about those forces because they're very important to recognize so that you understand and become aware that they're there. The first force is emotional spending. Money is rarely just transactional. Things like stress, boredom, celebration, loneliness, anxiety, all of these have spending signatures. When emotions drive financial decisions in the absence of a real-time tracking system, budgeting never has a chance. It's going to lose every time. Okay? The second force is the abstraction problem. When money exists as a number on a screen rather than a tracked living record, it feels theoretical. Theoretical money is easy to spend because you're spending in theory. The psychological distance between a budget written on paper and actual spending behavior is where overspending lies. The third force is present bias. The brain is wired to value immediate reward over future benefit. It doesn't really like to process delayed gratification. The satisfaction of today's purchase is real and immediate. The consequence to next month's budget is abstract and where I deal with it when the time comes. Without a structure, that makes the future concrete. Present bias wins every time. The fourth is the fresh start illusion. Every new month feels like a clean slate, which psychologically signals that last month's overspending no longer matters. Without a summary budget connecting the months together, this illusion repeats indefinitely and the pattern is never broken. Now, there's a common thread with all of these forces, because every one of these psychological forces is amplified by a one-dimensional budgeting system. So if you're coming up with your projected budget, and that's the letter of the law, and that's the finality of your budgeting process, with no real-time feedback, no consequence visibility, and no long-term pattern recognition built in, well, you can consider it done. And the forces will win every time. Okay? So, let's come up with a structural counter here, because these forces are pretty significant if you want to know the truth. Okay? How does the budgeting in 3 dimensions rewire your spending patterns? Oh, good question. Good question. Well, you cannot willpower your way out of a psychological pattern, but you can build a system that makes the pattern harder to repeat and easier to catch. That is exactly what budgeting in 3 dimensions actually does. So let's talk about the dimensions again. It's necessary. We got to keep going over them because we got to understand the impact of them. The first dimension, the projected budget. The projected budget psychologically counters directionalist spending. Okay? If you're writing a projected budget, that's an act of intentional setting. It creates a mental contract between you and your money before emotions, before impulse, or present bias has a chance to intervene. Now, there's a reason why intention alone is not enough. See, a plan written and then forgotten is immediately vulnerable to every psychological force named previously. The projected budget must connect to something active, which is why the second dimension is non-negotiable. So what is the second dimension? That's the actual budget. And the actual budget psychologically counters abstraction and present bias. Recording actual spending in real time collapses the psychological distance between the plan and the behavior. Money stops being abstract. Every purchase becomes a conscious, documented choice. Ooh, what a difference. Now, how does that neutralize present bias? When you track your actual spending, the future consequence of today's purchase becomes visible right now, in the present. The overspend category is right there in front of you, in real time, while you can still do something about it. Emotional spending thrives in the dark, okay? The moment you are actively tracking every dollar, unconscious spending patterns are forced into the light. And conscious awareness is the beginning of behavioral change. Then there's the third dimension. We're talking about the summary budget. The summary budget psychologically counters the fresh start illusion. The summary budget destroys the fresh start illusion altogether by making every month's data visible alongside the months before it. Patterns that felt invisible before, they become undeniable. When a listener can see that they overspent in the same category month after month, the behavior is no longer an isolated slip. It is a pattern. And named patterns can be intentionally interrupted. So over time, the summary budget becomes a record of improvement, not just mistakes. Watching the pattern change across months is one of the most powerful psychological reinforcements available in personal finance. And you're going to love it when you finally experience that. So let's think about it. If you got abstraction and present bias, that is countered by the actual budget. If you have a fresh start illusion, that's countered by the summary budget. If you are dealing with directionalist spending or emotional spending, that is countered by the projected budget. You should feel the precision of the solution. Budgeting in 3 dimensions is not just a financial tool. It is a behavioral architecture. It changes the environment in which spending decisions are made. So now it's time to do a self-awareness check and take a moment for yourself and get some personal insight into yourself and where you lie with these forces. Think about the last time you overspent. Which force was at work? Was it stress? Was it emotional driving the purchase? Was it the feeling that the budget number was just theoretical? Was it the sense that new month was coming and you could reset everything? Most people have a dominant overspending trigger. Some are emotional spenders. Others are abstract thinkers who lose connection with their numbers at some point. Others are chronic fresh starters. Knowing your pattern is the first act of financial self-awareness and where you are in this situation. And that's one of the reasons why we're talking about this subject. Financial control is not the absence of desire. It is the presence of a system that catches the impulse, presents the reality, and creates a pause between the feeling and the transaction. So now you have a pause. You have a quiet moment. You're now a fly on the wall watching what you're about to do next. And you get that pause. Budgeting in 3 dimensions is that pause. It is behavioral architecture disguised as a budgeting method. And for the overspender, it is the most powerful financial tool available. See, this segment is the pivot from understanding to ownership. You get to move from, oh, I know why that happens, to, oh, I know what to do about it. Keep in mind that American capitalism, for it to function properly and the way that it goes about doing it, 93% of the Americans need to have the psychology of an emotional spender, or we all say a consumer. There's no intention for you to become aware of your psychological behaviors. Because if you become aware of your psychological behaviors, then you can change your situation to where you're no longer a consumer. You put yourself out of that. And American capitalism wants to take your money. And it's hard to take your money if you're not doing that emotional spending. And that's where we are. What is the system and the tool that addresses the root cause? Okay? Understanding your overspending psychology is essential. But awareness alone does not build the structure you need to change the pattern. That requires a system designed to work with your psychology, not against it. So there's budgeting in 3 dimensions, the money management course. Oh, we're coming back to that again. Yes, we are. Because what does it cover? The course goes beyond budgeting mechanics and addresses the behavior patterns and mental models that drive financial decisions, including the psychology of overspending covered in this episode. Matter of fact, when you get to session 1, that's the first thing we address. It's the mental mindset that's needed to change, that needs the psychological change so that you can become a financial steward. What does it produce? A listener who finishes the course does not just know how to run a 3-dimensional budget. They understand why each dimension exists as a behavioral counter and how to use it intentionally when the dominant trigger fires. Okay? How does this transform a person once they've done the course? The course turns financial self-awareness into a repeatable monthly practice. Knowledge becomes structure, structure becomes habit, and habit becomes consistency. So then we also have the Budget 360 application tool. What does it provide for the overspender? The tool creates the behavior architecture that this episode describes. The projected budget sets the intention. The actual budget delivers real-time visibility. And the summary budget reveals the pattern over all the time. So all 3 live in one place and work together. Every time the listener opens Budget 360, the application tool, to record a purchase, they are re-engaging with their plan, their reality, and their progress simultaneously. That engagement is the pause between impulse and consequence. What's the long-term payoff if I were to use this tool? After 3 to 6 months of using the tool across all 3 dimensions, the overspending patterns that felt uncontrollable become visible. They become measurable. They become manageable. So, the course of action here is the book, the course, or the Budget 360 application tool. Start wherever you are, but start with a system that understands why you spend the way you do. See, the course and the tool are psychologically informed tools, not generic financial products. They were built with the understanding that behavior drives finance, not the other way around. The Budget 360 tool is the behavioral pause made structural. For the overspender, the framing is far more compelling than any feature list. The next time you feel the pull to spend outside your plan, I want you to remember this. That pullback has a name, it has a pattern, and it has a counter. You are not powerless against it. You just needed the right system. Before your next purchase decision, ask yourself which force is driving it. Emotion, abstraction, present bias, or fresh start thinking. Naming it interrupts it. The system sustains the interruption month after month after month. Pick up Budgeting in 3 Dimensions. Pick up the book. Or enroll in the course. Or access the Budget 362. Or and delve in all 3. The system that counters your psychology is ready when you are. So you can go to our website, robertfnewkirk.com, and then click the link that goes to the book, or the link that goes to the course, or the link that goes to the Budget 360 application tool. Remember, you don't have a signing problem. You don't have a spending problem. You don't have a significant problem. You have a systems problem. And now you know exactly what the system solves and what it can do for you. And that system is budgeting in 3 dimensions.